right, I'm going to rely on that then, and let's start our Finance Committee meeting for Tuesday, May 12th, and call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Howard.
And so if we could, like we normally would do, starting with Jean, just to introduce ourselves and go ahead, let's take it as we can. Jean?
Jean Lovett, Finance Director, Town Accountant.
Lynn?
Heather Moore, Finance Committee.
Carol Gargolinsky, Finance Committee.
Lynn Mazzulli, Finance Committee. I just said, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Sandy?
Sandy Kuipers, Finance Committee.
Phil, are you still out there? Well, hopefully Phil's in there somewhere and maybe we'll be able to rejoin us. Howard D'Amico, Finance Committee Chair. So that does give us a quorum.
Phil Landry is, I can't hear him, so I don't know if his mic is on.
I know we saw him about 5 to 10 minutes ago. So
yeah,
Phil, maybe you're, like last time, maybe you're out there and fully hearing all of us, but at the moment we cannot hear you. Can anyone see Phil?
I can see him. His mouth is moving, but his no voice.
Phil, when I didn't have a voice, I just nodded my head a lot. Can you nod your head to indicate you can hear us?
Okay.
Is that a nod? Great.
Yes, there's a nod for you, Howard.
All right. So we'll call that 5 3/4. All right. So why don't we proceed? So before we started the meeting, I was hoping, well, let's, when the meeting started, what I'd like to do is hear from Jean for a few minutes regarding her concerns regarding her perception that we should hold a special town meeting this spring in order to help facilitate her budgeting process. Jean, can you address that for a few minutes, please?
And really that would be the annual town meeting part. So typically the town holds a special and an annual the same night. What happens at the special is we do the cleanup for the current fiscal year and we vote the budgets and the other articles for the, which would be FY21. And again, there's a lot of uncertainty right now as to whether or not we can even hold a special and annual, which I am very grateful that the Finance Committee has agreed to hold this meeting as well as be part of the joint meeting next week to discuss our options going forward. And the Board of Selectmen are meeting now and Matt is with the board. So I don't know what they're discussing at their meeting and really the outcome. From my perspective, if we are allowed to hold a special, I am requesting an annual be held at the same time, at the same night, the same day, the same, you know, whatever it's night or day, if it's a Saturday, whatever time that is, in hopes that we could have a base budget for the FY21. We could vote the elected salaries that's typically voted at the at the annual town meeting, the 53 E&a-halves, a base budget for the omnibus budget, which would be, you know, the general fund budget, water, sewer, and transfer station and cable. Those would be the main articles, and maybe defer, if people are very concerned, any other zoning or the other type of articles that are typically held at that annual, defer those to a subsequent town meeting. What that does to me, it gives me a cleaner approach to FY21. Because now I have a budget to work with. It's not a 1/12. We're not looking for approval from the state. We're not looking for the board to approve it. It's town meeting approved. It's appropriated. We can sign contracts because there's an appropriation. We can, you know, we know the big pieces anyways. We know health insurance. We know Worcester Regional Retirement. We know debt. We know we have to fund the school at net school spending. We know BVT's base number. So we know the bigger pieces anyways, where having it the number's not going to change for those pieces. We know them. What would change is possibly whether or not we give steps and COLAs for the non-union people, and that would be whether or not the compensation is included in the annual. At this time, and again, I'm not at the board meeting, so I don't know if that's even going to be recommended at this time because of the uncertainty. We won't have state numbers. There's no question about that. But we won't have state numbers if we have a 1/12 budget either. In either case, you're not going to know that revenue piece. My thought would be to use free cash to stabilize the FY21 budget. We don't know how, it will just smooth things over into next fiscal year. So so we're not making decisions, without having the state numbers available. And I think we do a lot of, in these type of scenarios, we spin our wheels a lot because we have a lot of what ifs. We don't have any certainty. And I don't think we're going to have certainty by July 1st. We never have state numbers by July 1st on a good year. So we're definitely not going to have them now. But like I said, in either case, whether you do a 1/12 or you do an appropriation with an annual, you will not have that number. You will be still spending money without having that revenue piece. I think we have to go in a very conservative approach. I definitely agree with the board on that, and do like I said, a base budget now, and at the fall town meeting, you have certified new growth. We should have the state numbers, the cherry sheet numbers, so we'll have more information there. On the local receipt side, I don't see much of a negative impact, with the exception of meals tax, because the restaurant's open. They're not going to open to full capacity. So I think that would be the one category that we would be hurt in, and we budget about 30,000 there. So we will have to adjust, local receipts a little bit. DOR is going to be very careful about what they allow us to put down for estimated receipts. They haven't received the guidelines. Again, this is new for all of us from state down. So we're really just gathering information as it comes available to us. They're kind of changing the rules a little bit to just try to work with cities and towns. And again, the 1/12 is a change, but I'm not sure it's a good change. I think it would help if we were not able to convene. I think that's the big issue.
Jean, may I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
Jean? Okay. Were you?
Yes.
Okay. So, and again, if I may, I just, terms that and they flow off the tip of your tongue quickly, it's what you're dealing with all day. I need to digest a little more. I think for me, what I'd like to try to understand, I tried to take some notes on the items you indicated you felt we already knew, and those seem to essentially be on the expense side. And then certain numbers we did know and certain numbers we didn't know on the income side. One of the income pieces we clearly won't know is the state numbers. And Jean, when do we usually get those numbers?
We usually get those numbers in July. So they always come in after the fiscal year has started, for at least the last couple of years. We typically, Douglas used House 1, which is the governor's number for budgeting purposes. So when you receive...
When does that come out?
That did come out. So any revenue projections that I've handed out included the House 1 number, which is the governor's number. I do not expect that to be I think state aid is not going to be at that level. I would be surprised. I think there'll be some reduction from the House 1.
And I know you don't like to do specifics. Some reduction 5% or some reduction 30%?
And that's the big question mark. I don't know. I cannot get an answer from DOR regarding that.
And you don't have a good, it could be anywhere in that very large range.
It could be.
Okay, I won't press you beyond that. What else for revenue, Gene, don't we know?
You won't know certified new growth, but we put in 125,000. I think that's a safe number. If anything, well, we budget conservatively in that category, and we raise and appropriate at the November
Beyond
town
that.
meeting. So we use that
What else
as
for
an opportunity
revenue,
to look
Gene,
at the budgets
don't-
again and maybe increase the departments that we were very conservative with, or we have more information at that time. You know, maybe a department had something unforeseen happen in September, October, we're able to raise and appropriate into that department in the November town meeting, handle that with any additional certified new growth above what we use as an estimate. So we are using 125. I think that's a safe number. You know we can go up 2.5% plus new growth. That's a safe number. I
Okay.
believe, with the exception, like I said, against meals tax on the estimated receipt side, I think that is the one category that I'd be very concerned about, and I would probably, decrease that.
Sure.
On the other side of that, we can ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation. I mean, currently, I think it's in there for 320,000. That's one category that's been doing well, so we may be able to look at that as increasing.
Okay.
Why do I have two fills?
One for sound, one for visual.
Oh, still can't see them, but sorry, that threw me a little bit.
So Gene, you said a few minutes ago that on the state numbers, you'd instead fill in with free cash. Is that what we do every year anyway?
We have not done that since the override passed. The reason for the override was to help so we wouldn't use free cash for the operating budget. It's best practice. It really is. And again, this is strictly my opinion.
But hold on, I'm just trying to understand. When do we get each year the cherry sheet math? When do we get that money?
Well, the physical money comes in monthly. So we receive cherry sheet money, which comes in a monthly basis to us for cash flow purposes. But the amount that
it starts for the next fiscal year, with a receipt in July?
We will receive a receipt at the end of July for July, correct?
Okay. And normally that would be a House 1 estimate and then a final somewhere early in July with the previous year closed out?
I think you're confusing the two. So we use House 1 for budget. By the time we receive our July, we would have gotten the actual cherry sheet numbers. So when we receive our money at the end.
That's okay. I think I did understand that.
Okay.
So my question is, in your suggestion that would use free cash for the July actual cherry sheet receipts?
No. What I'm suggesting is if the cherry sheet was reduced, and I'm really just throwing out numbers, by 10%, instead of reducing the budgets by 10%, that we use free cash to stabilize the budget.
So
it is my hope.
Gene,
so that we're not making.
So that we can put in a budget at an annual or special town meeting, if you will, an increment of 10. And if the cherry sheet were to come in at 9, the real one in July would backfill it with free cash. To get
you would have to appropriate it at the annual. So it's a revenue source. So if we expected that we would have $100,000 reduction in cherry sheet number or state aid number, then we would do a transfer from free cash for $100,000. That would be part of our funding source.
Okay.
So we'd have to appropriate.
And then if it were only 80 less or whatever, that would just be additional revenue.
Correct. We don't have to
It would
spend
later
it.
get transferred back to free cash.
Well, you can't transfer it back to free cash, but you could transfer it to stabilization and you could do something else.
Fair enough. Okay. All
So
right.
I guess my thought is, you know, the town has made such great strides over the last 2 years. And again, these are only my thoughts. The board is the policy making board. You know, Matt makes his recommendations to the Board of Selectmen. I really am only for suggestion purposes only, I guess. I just hate to have the town go backwards in the progress that we've made over the last 2 years. And that's why it is never a good idea to use free cash for an operating budget, because it's a non-reoccurring source of revenue for a reoccurring expense. It's like using your tax return to pay your electric bill. The tax return is finite. Your electric bill is going to be ongoing. So that's not a very good practice. So on a normal basis, I would, even though that was the town's practice for many years, I don't advocate for that. However, in this particular case, these are just unprecedented times and extraordinary circumstances. I would hate to do a slash and burn approach and not allow us some time to stabilize. And that's the only reason why I would make that recommendation.
Well, let's go back and understand then.
Jean?
Pardon? So, Jean,
I
you're
wanted
still
to ask Jean a
advocating.
quick question.
Sure.
Jean, I wanted to know how much money is in free cash?
Free cash. One good thing about working in my office is I can look up numbers and I don't have to say, I'm going to get back to you.
Right.
Just give me 1 second. I'll pull it up.
Howard, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, Phil, we can.
Okay,
Yes.
fixed.
Yay. Welcome.
Oh, it's good to be heard, really is. My wife doesn't listen to me, and that's all I've been able to talk to, so it's nice to talk. You can hear me now.
So there's $1,483,000 in free cash right now.
Okay, thank you.
So, Jean, what
And
do
Jean,
you
can
know?
follow on?
What's that?
I'm sorry?
Can we ask Jean, what was last year's free cash number?
Well,
For
last year's
FY19?
certified free cash was $1,300,000. This year we certified $1,500,000. We did a couple transfers at the fall town meeting. We did a $50,000 transfer to OPEB, and we did a $18,155 into a supplement green fundings grant. So that brought it down to $1,400,000. But again, you know, if that gets into another conversation. Free cash is free cash because it's money that was turned back from other departments, or it is money that we collected above what we estimated for receipts. For instance, for motor vehicle, we budget, I'm not going to throw out numbers. We budgeted $1,300,000 for motor vehicle. I'm sorry, we budgeted $1,069,812 for motor vehicle. That's our budget. To date, we've taken in $1.3 million. So 234,000 is adding to next year's free cash number. So once I submit the balance sheet in the fall, this will be part of the free cash number because we took in more than we used to, for an estimate. That can go both ways. For instance, we are not charging interest on real estate taxes right now. The tax bills are due June 1st, lost a month in interest. So if you looked at the category of interest and demand, we may not make our revenue estimate because there's basically a month that we did not charge. We're not collecting on the demands. We're not, collecting an interest on that. So we're not going to make that one. So they all net together. So, it usually comes out to be a positive. So that what brings back to the free cash number for next year. The turnbacks may not be as high this year because we have COVID expenses that we're probably going to cover. Even though some of them may be reimbursed by FEMA, we may not have the money by June 30 to cover those. So we may be using, you'll probably see interdepartmental transfers over the next, hopefully 2-3 weeks if we don't have a special, where we may be transferring money from the health insurance budget to the ambulance wages to cover for the shifts that we had to have because of the COVID. So we won't have as many turnbacks to add to free cash next year. So there's a bunch of moving pieces because of the situation that we're in. But so I don't want you to think that because we have $1.4 million now, we're going to have $1.4 million next year.
But Gene, you're not advocating that we're digging deep into free cash for the next budget. You're just advocating that in order to have a set budget that we can vote on in June, we back up the cherry sheet estimates with free cash, but we try and have cherry sheet estimates that we think are going to accurately reflect the final numbers we'd actually receive, correct?
Well, in a sense, you are using free cash as a funding source. So you are supplementing the budget with the free cash number to offset the decrease that we may get in state aid.
That's okay. I didn't appreciate that then. Gene, where is that set of numbers, the proposed budget you're talking about, coming from at the moment? Is that coming from Matt?
Yes, that would come from it. I don't know if Matt agrees with this. I mean, like I said on the onset, this is strictly my opinion.
So as of May 12, there's a separate meeting going on with Matt and Board of Selectmen that may be addressing that. It will then talk about next Tuesday in a joint meeting, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. And you don't know at the moment whether Board of Selectmen and Matt are suggesting that kind of a concept, because again, the last meeting we all had together, there was with less information and less view to the future, there was a general consensus that we might want to wait altogether on a special and annual until the fall. So they may or may not be having a different view tonight and having a discussion like we're having. Okay. And
correct. I could be all by myself on my island again.
Gene, are you in the building right now?
I am.
Is Matt in the building down the hallway?
I believe he could be. He could be in the Board of Selectmen's meeting.
Have we got any way with proper social distancing to ask him to be able to join us in one manner or another at the, if Board of Selectmen concludes early, or if they finish his piece before we're finished, so we get an update just from him on BOS discussion tonight on this issue?
Okay. I can. I don't know that we'll be done before they'll be done before us though.
I understand, but it would be useful tonight heading into next week to have some understanding of what that parallel meeting was doing. Gene, I hear what you're saying. You've come through, for me at least, cleaner tonight with your own floor for a few more minutes on why you want to try to have a meeting, a town meeting before June 30. So Gene, I suppose the second part of this that you probably just can't address at all is what you know since our last meeting on the issues of even whether there's a logistical option for an annual town meeting in June. Has that been discussed in a manner that you're aware of?
I would defer to Matt on that subject.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so Gene,
Let me,
in all respect, go ahead.
Let me go put this note in front of him. Maybe this is a great time to approve those minutes that I sent you.
This is a great time, folks. I was thinking to approve the minutes. So do people have the minutes that Gene sent to me weeks ago that I sent to everyone 15 minutes ago?
I don't have,
Carol, do you have them?
I do not.
Okay. Anybody else have them?
I have it.
I have to pull up my other computer to look at them.
Okay.
Yeah, I have it.
Or maybe I
Are you talking about 429 draft meeting minutes, Howard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Let me see if I
if we
pull
can
them up on my
get
phone.
5 people to look at them, even on their phone, then we could vote to approve them, or if not, we could all enjoy me reading them. But that would seem like not a good idea.
all right, I pulled it up on my phone. Let me
And I
look.
apologize for not getting them to you guys all earlier. That's not my specialty.
Were these requests for transfers? That's all oh, okay, I see that the minute meetings are laid down in the PDF you sent.
Okay, request for transfer from the reserve funds. Okay.
Ooh, it's quiet here.
We're reading. Ms. Lovett feels that this would be challenging and would prefer to find a way to vote the budget.
You see how I was all by myself on my own little island.
Yeah, it doesn't say anyone else concurred.
I felt the support all the way home.
I'll bet.
But Howard, I
much
did thank
better.
you for the lifeline you threw me.
This is much easier to get people's, subtle needs in person, or not
Yeah.
so subtle, when they can throw things at you.
You did throw me a lifeline, Howard, and I did appreciate it.
We're trying, Gene. Well, the only change I would make then to the proposed minutes, Gene, can we make a change and then vote on it?
You can if the minutes aren't reflecting what happened.
So I think on page 2, it says the consensus of the BOS and the FC was to wait until fall for ATM. But I think that was still subject to another meeting or meetings in May to discuss further. And I think that's important.
Okay, you
I
can
agree,
you can
Howard.
put that in your motion.
Does everyone agree with that change is right? The
Yeah.
line as it stands suggests that it was a done deal. And I don't think that it was, and I think that is in fact why we're having tonight's meeting and a further meeting next week. So with that change,
Correct.
Yeah,
Concur.
I agree. I don't think it was a done deal.
adopting that change into these minutes. So the change would be, if there's a record that needs to be kept for this, the consensus of the BOS and the FC was to wait until fall for ATM, comma, subject to a desire to have a further meeting or meetings in May to discuss the matter further, based on further developments. Okay? That change, does anyone want to make a motion to approve the amended minutes for the meeting of Wednesday, April 29th?
I'll second it, Howard.
I didn't make the motion. I asked if there was a motion.
Oh, I'll make a motion then to accept the amended minutes.
Excellent, Phil. Thank you.
I second the motion.
Okay. And Lynn, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so that carries. So Jean, were you able to put a note 6 feet from Matt?
I did. I actually had to encroach a little bit, but I
Sure.
quickly.
And did you get any sense from him?
He didn't think his meeting would run too much longer.
Okay. I think that's useful then to get that summary. So Jean, those were the only set of meetings you had available, minutes you had available at the moment, correct?
That's correct. I'm going to have to look back to see what you've approved, because I know on some of the meetings we postponed making, taking up action on those. So I'll have to look back. But I do have 2 reserve fund transfers for you.
Correct.
As I mentioned
those-
the last time we spoke, I don't want to I thought you were going to say something. The way I'm approaching the closeout of this year is I asked the departments for those that felt the immediate need for the reserve fund transfer. That's money that is for unforeseen extraordinary expenses. These are the 2 that came from the departments in that category. I do not want to touch the remainder of the reserve fund, or I don't want to bring anything before you for consideration, because I want to leave that as kind of like a last resort. If we're unable to hold a special town meeting, the way I would handle the needs of the other departments would be bringing forward an intra or interdepartmental transfer, which both the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee have to approve. And what that does is allow us to move money from one budget to the other without town meeting, but both boards have to approve it. So these 2 before you tonight, tax title, one for highway maintenance, were of more of an immediate nature. And that's why I'm seeking a reserve fund transfer for those departments.
Okay. So Jean, do we have $20,000 currently in the reserve fund before these transfers?
That is correct.
Okay. So if you would, could you discuss, let's take the first one is with regard to the construction and maintenance request. Could you just walk us quickly through that one? It's $5,500.
That's basically replenishing that account for a sander that they had to purchase during the winter months. That's a seasonal department, so they use at this time of year. So it looks like they have a lot of money left. They have 36,000 in there now. That gets spent now because they're doing work on the roads. They're doing, now's their time to use that account. So by putting that money or replenishing that money into that account, it just helps them do their work in May and June. So that's why we're looking to have it done with a reserve fund. So the money was used to purchase the sander for one of the highway trucks. and we're just replenishing that. Typically, this would have been part of the Maytown meeting that we just had. Again, we couldn't have it, so that's why we're seeking it in this manner.
Okay, and so that's 5,500 moved from the reserve fund to the, what sub-budget is this specifically?
This is the highway construction and maintenance account.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve that reserve fund transfer request?
I'll make a motion for it.
Make a motion.
Any second? Phil will move.
Yeah,
Was
I
that-
can second it and have Sandy do the motion.
Yep. All those in favor of approving that reserve fund transfer?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That's approved. Jean, do you need signatures on that?
I would probably need at least yours, Howard, as the chair.
Okay.
If you want, are you comfortable coming to town hall if I can meet you in the parking lot? Have you sign, or are you not available? You know, that sounds weird. We usually have people bring their own pen.
I bring my own pen,
Yes, yes,
my own face mask.
yeah.
Jean, I will, why don't we go through both of these? Yes, I would do that if that's the best.
It doesn't have to be
Suggestion.
tonight.
Well, I appreciate that. Okay. Okay, so
Come on,
that's
Howard,
fine.
get down there.
Exactly.
I was trying to be nice.
Thanks, Jean.
Gene, don't give him an inch.
Jean, I'm still in Worcester, so you would have to wait a half an hour.
Always plenty of work to keep me busy, but that's okay.
All right, let's approach that in a minute. We have a second request for reserve fund transfer. Can you walk us through that one, please?
That's for tax title, and there's been a lot of activity in that account. In addition, the District Registry of Deeds has increased their fees. So they went from a $75 redemption fee to $105. So tax title is important in that, you know, it helps us do some research so we can move things along in the collection process. So this is due to an extensive research on Davis Street land. And again, the fees increased. So there was a couple different things that happened in this account. I did ask Cheryl, this is being, you know, once we do the 5,800, I did ask that no additional work unless it's really necessary be done on this account, because again, anything after this would have to come from another department to be funded. So I am hoping this is going to take us through June 30.
It's Gene, just a quick question. It's for a tax title on Davis Street land property, and that's for legal fees to move in the direction, or just to pay the Mass Land Record folks?
Well, that's just one piece. That's just one piece of what happens. We've already, you know, tax title, we've already spent let me just get that. That's a $19,000 budget. You know, we've already had redemptions and we have to pay for maintenance out of that for the software, and we've already had some legal work. So this is basically what put it over the $19,000 budget. So this was the extraordinary piece of it. And again, the redemption.
So what? It was 19,000, but now it's 24,500 or whatever.
Yeah, well,
Gene,
with the additional bill council.
Gene, this isn't Richard Bowen, right? This isn't town council. This is outside council.
This is outside council.
Okay.
They do land court work. They, like I said, any research work they do for parcels or for land that's in tax title. This is tax title only.
Sure. Any other questions? Anybody?
Mm-mm.
A motion to approve? Does anyone want to make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Thank you, Carol. Anyone want to second that motion?
I'll
Second.
second it.
Okay, and all those in favor of approving this reserve fund transfer request?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? That's approved, Gene, and so I can talk with you. We can communicate maybe via email the time tomorrow I can stop by.
Sure.
Would that work, Gene?
Yeah, what, we can talk offline and what works. Sure.
I've got to be here in Worcester for 9 o'clock. I could come down for 10 or 10:30 if you'd like.
Oh, that's awesome.
You want to do 10:30?
Sure.
Okay.
You just knock on my window and
Yeah, I'll come in.
I will.
I'll come in assuming you don't have any dangerous viruses up
No.
there. Oh,
Honestly, I do meet people in the parking lot. I wasn't
you
joking.
prefer? Okay, I'll let you know when I'm in the parking lot then.
And bring your own pen, and we use the drop box as a nice little table outside.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, we'll make that work. 10:30. Thanks, Gene.
So,
Thank
so
you.
to summarize, that makes the free cash from 20K now to around 8,700. Is that somewhere around right?
Cash, that is the reserve fund transfer.
Oh, okay. Reserve fund transfer. Sorry.
Reserve
That's the
fund
FinCom.
account.
Yeah.
So
we
with
start
50. Go
correct.
ahead, Gene.
We started at 50. We had a $30,000 transfer back in February, and this brings it down to 8,700. Again, my thought is not to touch this account right now. I think I want to handle anything else either through a special town meeting or intra-departmental transfers.
Like the funding to reduce the student fees, right?
I'm sorry?
Like the funding to reduce the student activity, the student sports fees, right?
I don't think so, Howard.
That you haven't let me touch for years.
Uh,
There aren't any sports fees, Gene.
I know. Well, yeah. Not
You're
now, there
safe.
aren't.
You're safe,
I want to pay some money anyway.
Sadly.
right? There you go.
Can they send me a bill?
All right.
Because I want to pay for it.
Old business, new business.
Actually-
Anything?
We just refunded those that paid the spring sports.
Yeah,
Oh,
I get it.
sad all the way around.
Yep.
Okay, any old business, anybody?
If there,
So-
I'd
if,
just like to say one thing about having a, go ahead.
go ahead. You can go first, Carol.
I'd like to say one. Okay, thanks. About having a special town, Gene, on having the town meeting and the special town meeting. Because we only need 15 people for quorum, right, for a town meeting?
It is a very
That's
low
what we
quorum.
need.
Not what we need, it's who would want to come.
Right.
And really you have to make it available
Right.
for
Well,
anybody.
Right. Well, I know that, yes. But I guess my only fear is that if you only had, say, 15 people or so that showed up at the meeting, you got a pretty good idea on how the budget should go and where the numbers should go. And the only fear that I would have is 4 or 5 people would get together and try to change numbers where they're going. Is there any way that to make sure that that would not happen?
Well,
No
town meeting is,
legal way, Carol.
it's a public meeting. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
You want to prevent the
Typically your
coup?
15 people would, the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee are all voting members of town meeting. So hopefully you would be there to explain the ramifications of any negative impacts of any particular vote. Again, if we look at the annual, I don't know that they weren't hundreds of people unless there was a special item on town meeting. I'm trying to see what last year.
Carol, it would be like having an election today and you could win a Board of Selectmen seat if you got 6 friends to show up.
Yeah, they had over, I asked Chris and she thought there were over 100 mail-in ballots or absentee ballots.
Well,
But
there you go.
You're correct. You're right. You could be Board of Selectmen member.
Right? It's unbelievable.
There were a decent amount of people voting today. I think it seemed like when I was there.
Yeah. But to Carol's point, right? This, if we hold the annual or special in June, the good news is, to Jean's desire, we hold it, and it gives us some stability in budgeting. Carol's concern is you might have a small group that could sway math disproportionate to the rest of the voters, but if they don't show up, that's on them. So Carol, I appreciate that concern. I think what I was about to do too, Carol, was open it up to everybody else. What are folks' thoughts tonight before next Tuesday's meeting, where we'll have Board of Selectmen and Matt, the town administrator, suggesting what may be their coalesced view by then of how to proceed? What are Finance Committee members' thoughts this evening in terms of how to proceed?
Howard, can we recap for just one?
I'll go first, I think.
Comments. And I wanted to be clear so I understood the situation. It seems like the cherry sheet stuff, we don't have the numbers that they won't be in for a while in July, I guess. Is that what we're saying? What is there any kind of inkling?
There's a big question mark this year.
Is there any kind of inkling as far as the amount of percent that it is going to be deficient? I know that Matt was saying somewhere around 4% of revenues and things like that are changing. What's your general sense, or the word on the street, or is there any kind of general sense of what that cherry sheet is going to look like? Because that's somewhere around almost $10 million of our budget, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so what percentage of that 10 million won't be there? Ballpark. Best guess.
I can't answer that. We have no indication from the state. It's not like this is last year the same circumstances happened and this is what they did. This is very
unprecedented.
It's unprecedented times. I don't know how the state's going to react. Are we going to get money from the federal government? Will they be able to pass that down? How fast is the recovery going to be? I mean, it's a big question mark. No one's answering that question for me.
But Jean, your proposal, and Phil, this isn't necessarily going to be adopted by Board of Selectmen or town administrator, but Jean's proposal, as I was understanding it, was she'd like to see a budget proposed and seek passage of it that would, let's suppose the number were theoretically perhaps 4%, that would look to fill that 4% in, or at least a portion of it, using free cash, under the idea that if the number turns out to be less than that deficit, that part of that free cash would be restored.
Right. And that's assuming where do we sit with the budget? I know the big part of it was school committee and the schools, and they were talking about the negotiations on the contract. I haven't heard anything about that yet, so I'm just kind of wondering, how does that fit into this whole crazy world?
Yeah, and I think I'll let Matt speak to that. But as you can imagine, since March 13th, a lot of our time has been spent on COVID.
Right. So Phil, I think the answer is it's still up in the air.
Matt may have some additional information. I don't have it.
So we got 1,483,000 in free cash. and we got a deficit possibly in the cherry sheet of anywhere between 400,000 and $1 million.
Well, that'd be 10%. Oh,
Right. Yeah, no, I'm just, you always plan for worst case, right?
well, no, what would happen is Gene's suggestion is you might plan the 4% and lock it in. And if it were 8%, well, you'd be short that much. Your budget wouldn't, you'd have a deficit in your budget, not in your free cash allocation. You would have locked the 400,000 in what was approved at the town meeting.
And you would have to amend the budgets at the fall town meeting. No
Right.
different than any other year. So
Right.
and luckily in past years, we were able to increase budgets because
Right.
new growth was certified at a higher amount. If we did not have the state aid money that we anticipated, we would have to decrease budgets. Just to get back to Carol's, last year we had 71 voters at the annual town meeting.
I mean, we
Yeah.
could, between the finance committee and the selectmen, you could almost have a quorum.
Yeah.
But there was only 71, and that was, there was no, big topics being, I mean,
Right.
I considered this big topic, but other people don't. But
Yeah.
it was a low turnout.
Right. So Phil, to your question, Gene's proposal, whether or not it's adopted by BOS or town administrator, is to create some certainty within the uncertainty, right? To set a number and say, this is the amount would be prepared to allocate from free cash so we can set a budget. And hopefully Cherry Sheet comes close to it. Maybe it surpasses it, but at least come November 10 or 20 or whatever date, the town has passed a budget for a year rather than 12 little increments. And then to Gene's point, in November, if you hold another special, you readjust again.
Mhm. So then the real benefit of this is really our ability to provide a year-long budget. To kind of,
Yeah, I think so. With an ability to set 97% of it now and not let the 3%, kill the ability to set it at all, and an adjustment in the fall. And if we were interested in trying to proceed that way, we still may get, it's still Finance Committee's budget, but it's Board of Selectmen's determination and probably the town administrators as to whether to do a annual and a special. And that's something we can address with them next week. But I am curious, Carol wanted to speak, and I'm curious generally with everybody, if I may, thoughts on, maybe thoughts on Gene's concept of the budget, but also thoughts on what people believe, the viability of a town meeting a month from now.
I think we should have it.
I agree with you, Carol.
That we should have it.
Yes, I do.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. I think if only historically you only get, 70, 100 people, you can space them out enough, and the ones who are not comfortable coming don't come.
Well, I think that, part of that decision is up to the moderator too. There's a lot, out of my control or even my recommendations. I mean, I'll be interested what Keith's take, last time I asked him to talk to his colleagues to see how other communities are going to hold their town meetings. My counterparts, their communities are scheduled to have them mid-June. So with the expectation that they'll have a special and an annual. But, Keith had to do some research as to how that was going to happen. What's the safest way for that to happen? Because you don't want anything bad to happen because you held town meeting either.
Right.
So hopefully Keith will have some insight on that. I think our meeting on the 19th is going to be very important. I think we'll see where the board stands, you know, what their thoughts are, what Matt's thoughts are, you know, what Keith has been able to determine as to how can we do this safely, even if we're still social distancing, you know, what's the safest way to do that?
Anyone else?
So my comment is basically like the federal government. If you don't get an appropriation bill, you're under a continuing resolution, and it's a snowball, and it keeps going, and it gains momentum until you get an appropriation bill, and then you're playing catch up with all of your accounts. So I see the simplicity of just passing it, a budget, so at least you have a baseline for yourself already set. I think that makes Jean's job a lot easier. Obviously, social distancing. There's a high school with parking spaces. We can block it off and do it that way. I mean, versus going into the building, because I think going into a building is going to be a non-player. So you need to have a field or a parking lot big enough to accommodate everybody.
I can tell you all that the high school currently is planning to have a class night May 29th in the parking lot. I'm not sure all the logistics on that yet, but that would involve probably 100 vehicles or up to 100. So Heather, to your point, the structure is starting to come into place for alternate methods of getting everybody together. I don't know, again, to Jean's
That would be
point,
good to test it out first.
well, to a point. But again, you know, that'll to some extent be up to the town moderator, Keith, and what he's getting a sense of. So Jean, you're suggesting tonight that your counterparts are indicating that their respective town meetings in one form or another do appear to be starting to be scheduled or are being scheduled for June, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Oxford, I talked to the chair of the FinCom there. I happened to see him on a walk. He's looking at June 17th. I know Sutton's looking at June 22nd. You know, the expectation or the hope is that we can have that so that there will be a budget in place by June 30 or July 1st.
And Jean, I like your idea. I think it makes the most sense that town meeting and even the special, as long as we're there, they have very few warrant issues. They have very few issues to address. And, you know, while there may still be debate, the meeting might be 45 minutes rather than 2 hours and 45 minutes. Now, again, you know, you've got to figure out logistics of everybody in, everybody out, and everybody, you know, for the meeting, whether it's 45 minutes or 2 hours may not make a substantial difference, but I suppose the less crisscrossing of bodies, even on the stage, all helps.
Howard, Matt just joined me in my office. He's 6 feet away if you want to ask him any questions.
Well, Matthew, welcome.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee.
Matthew, could you identify yourself for the tape, please?
Matt Wojcik, Town Administrator.
Thank you, Matt. So Matt, the only thing we asked you to come in for was, you know, we have been having a discussion tonight, really in substantial part based on Jean's request and Jean's concerns regarding the real desire of her department to be able to have a special and a short annual, maybe in June, to give some budget, you know, the term tonight, baseline for moving forward for the year with an adjustment in November. And we were looking, as we know, we've got a joint meeting set up for next Tuesday to address what we talked about in the April 29th meeting with everybody. I think I think Finance Committee is starting to move toward a June special and short annual town meeting. And I wanted to, give you that update now, and also see what Board of Selectmen and the town administrators flavor is today versus April 29, so we understand that going in to the May 19 meeting.
Well,
So that was a question. Can you
there's a
give us
lot
an
there.
Can you give us
And
an update on?
I did
on your meeting
reiterate
tonight?
many times, that was my only.
I'm just wondering how well the microphone's picking me up. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you, Matt.
Okay. I'll project as best I can. Here's the thing. I find myself between a rock and a hard place. I have to prepare a budget. And so no matter what the scenario is, to me, the heavy lifting is going to be coming up with the savings and just being nimble enough and using enough foresight to make the necessary cuts early on in this most likely economic downturn, so that we're not, as some people would say, it's not a death by 1,000 cuts over a long period of time. So when I feel the burden of the budget on my back, that's what I feel. As far as I'm concerned, whether we have a town meeting in June or not, I do agree with Gene that it would be so much cleaner. It would be so much easier. It would be more like business as usual, and therefore more familiar. And we would be able to have a conversation about the spending and revenue forecasts based on milestones we all recognize. July 1, June 30, fall town, special town meeting to clean things up. It would be nice to have that rhythm uninterrupted. But I keep coming back to my fundamental concern is that the level of revenue shortfalls anticipated at the level of the Commonwealth are so significant that it really is going to be a significant political discussion by the General Assembly on how they're going to parse that out, whether it's programmatic cuts at the state level, how much of that trickles through the municipalities, how much of that trickles through education, both freestanding school districts as well as the regional school districts. All of those, nobody has given us any indication of where they're going on that topic. So it's kind of like you're shooting, you've got a flashlight and you're shining it into the abyss. And there's so much darkness, it just eats up the light because there's just no way to know what to do next. Now, today is May 12th. If we set a date, we have to set a date, by the way. We have to try to have a meeting before June 30, just because that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
If we set one for June 22nd, that's a full month and 10 days away. Now, obviously, we have other deadlines we have to hit before the actual day of that town meeting. But we would have enough time to get a sense of, is the reopening of the economy in other states a wise move, or is it backfired on people? Has the governor been successful with short-term borrowing and his $1 billion reimbursement request, by the way, to FEMA? Where is he getting, how is he putting all those pieces together himself? Because I think where he's at as a manager at the state level is just trying to get out of fiscal 20 in one piece. And so when we talk to state officials, we get the sense from them that fiscal 21 is not what they're thinking about right now. They're trying to get to June 30. They'll come up for air for about 30 seconds, and then they'll try to figure out what everybody's going to do after that. So it's in that environment where I think the best thing for us to do is be prepared for the eventuality that we may not be able to have a town meeting. The other piece of this, which often gets lost in conversation about our financial dynamic, is that town meeting is an institution of democracy. People have to have access to it. They have to be able to participate in it. And if our society is so concerned about getting sick, that they don't come out and participate in their meeting, they don't get to exercise their vote or their right, then the meeting is tarnished from that point of view, that only those people who felt confident enough in their own health situation, felt confident enough to go to town meeting and vote, and a whole bunch of people who really care about it because of some underlying health condition or their own way that they would view the world, don't want to come. You've disenfranchised that whole group of people. There may be folks, I mean, we can talk about having meetings outside and trying to test the sound system, make sure it works, but you're still going to have issues of where are people going to sit if they don't walk very well? What time of day are we going to have this? Are people going to be sensitive to the heat, to the sun? There's just so many variables. I don't want to put up false obstacles. I'm very concerned about the fundamental purpose of town meeting has always been public participation, and for the rest of us, a finite date, a date that we work towards and get past in order to keep the machinery of government working. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I know that might be as clear as mud, but I'm still very skeptical of trying to write a budget against an unknown revenue quantity. And maybe it's my own predilection to looking at the most negative or pessimistic is a better word, outlook. I just said to the Board of Selectmen, my problem is when I talk to my colleagues who have a less pessimistic outlook than me, nothing they say is very persuasive. It all sounds very hopeful. I'm looking back to the recession of 08, 09, and really parts of 2010 as the benchmark. If unemployment was at a high watermark of 10% during the Great Recession, so-called Great Recession, and we are already at 14.7% nationally, the highest since the Great Depression in 1930s, I'm worried that the most pessimistic scenario might also be the most likely one. And at that point, we're looking at a $1.2 million shortfall on the revenue side, and that's a very big bridge to cross. And if it's bigger than that, our plans for use of our, I don't want to say ample, but barely adequate financial reserves would be faster. That would militate making deeper cuts. See what I'm saying? What I fear is getting into a loop of not having cut enough because I didn't have the right information. Because certainly the departmental reorganizations that I would contemplate doing in order to hit a savings target have an element of pain to them, pain for individual employees, a certain amount of reorganizational effort, and an adjustment on the part of the public that may interact with those parts of town government. So I'm loath to engage in them until I absolutely have to as a result of the emergency. I've talked a lot. I'm open to anybody who wants to parse out any of those issues.
Matt, do you have any indication or any idea about what you're looking at for cuts? I know you don't know the numbers per se, or are you heading in certain directions, or anything you can give us in that area?
Yeah. So the Board of Selectmen just reviewed a policy. Remember, they don't adopt policy. Well, in this case, they've decided they want to use 3 readings. So when you guys jointly meet with them in 1 week, that'll be the 2nd reading. So I will circulate those policies to you tonight so you can look at what they're looking at. We settled on a target of trying to identify as much as 400,000 to cut from the entire budget for fiscal 21. And we would still have to use over $250,000 worth of free cash to balance the budget if we get that much in cuts. How do you get there? Well, it's obvious that we would be doing no more than net school spend. We would have to push very hard on BVT because there's an additional assessment in their budget request that may be unwarranted given the situation we're in. We have, as of tonight, approved letters to do impact bargaining with our collective bargaining units with respect to the COLA. So that's a cost of living adjustment, which for the past couple of years has been about 1.75%. And we want to take that to 0. On the municipal side, that saves about 70,000. We've got a couple of positions that we might have retirement. So we would take our time backfilling that position and save the salary. That's a one-time revenue, one-time cost saving, and it's not really permanent. When it comes to reorganization, which I'm least happy to talk about, I think we would be looking at, it would be a net savings, and I haven't done the calculation yet on it, but it would be replacing some element of human interaction with electronic interaction. So we would have to buy software, but we may not backfill a position, or we may not continue a position or two. There's an outsourcing possibility as well for one function. I'm really skeptical of it. I'm talking to my fellow town administrators to see what their experience has been with it. I know some people have reversed earlier decisions, so I don't want to make a mistake that they've already made, but I got to put that on the table. And then if you look back to when I first started working for Douglas, I had a list of savings that we did not have to go down those pathways because the override passed. So that was regionalization of dispatch, closure of the library, and there was one other that actually yielded some pretty good money. I'd have to go back and look at the list. It's in my model though, but when you add all those things up, you might get to 400,000 in cuts or a little bit more. I think we didn't really explicitly reach this consensus at the Board of Selectmen meeting tonight, but we did bandy about the idea that what we really want to try to get to is 300,000 in cuts. And if we identify 400,000 in possibilities, they may not have to do everything right away. Some of the feedback on that, though, was that if the cuts would have meaningful long-term impact on costs, that we should do them right away and not spend all this energy every year coming back and trying to take 1,000 here and 1,000 there, because it's a horrible way to run a government, because you never get off the ground, you know. There was also a policy discussed tonight about the prioritization of funds that could be relied upon to keep the operational budget of the town at a acceptable service level to the public, and rank ordering those sources of revenue. So free cash, unspent money that's been allocated for capital projects, stabilization, restricted receipts accounts for ambulance and wetland conservation. Those are some areas where we might look, but that gives you a sense of the depth of the town's reserves. So if you look at the three biggest: free cash, unspent capital funds that haven't already been obligated to a project in progress, and stabilization. And what you're going to end up with is just about $3.4 million. Our municipal side budget is 12. We've got about a quarter worth of operational spending that we could do with our reserves. So clearly we have to cut, and clearly it would be much better to add things back to the budget than it would be to have to come back and do another round. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, comprehensively. Thank you.
Anyone else? Matt, I was trying to get an idea of what you thought the Board of Selectmen's view tonight was on having a annual town meeting in June.
I don't think they want to. I think that's fair to say.
Budget concerns or safety concerns?
What's that?
Based on budget concerns, projection concerns, or safety concerns?
Revenue concerns. I don't think safety is Safety is not even really a concern of mine, to be blunt. It's a super contagious thing, and everybody needs to follow the guidelines around distancing, wearing a mask and whatnot when they're close to each other. I'm more concerned about the integrity of the institution and whether or not it plays the role it's supposed to play. That's my concern, but the board was more concerned about the revenue projection and getting caught short. I think it was Selectman Cortez who said, I'd hate to pass a budget on June 22nd and have somebody come at me on June 25th with a revenue cut that was a couple $100,000 more than I thought of when we passed a budget on the 3 days prior.
Okay. Who makes the final determination of whether there would be an annual town meeting in June?
Well,
Moderator.
one's head has to spin after you read all the things that have been passed at the state level. By my reading of it,
I've been reading a lot of them.
yeah, it seems like it's the Board of Selectmen, doesn't it? And it seems like the board can set the meeting, but it's not carte blanche. Some of the verbiage suggests that the moderator, in postponing the meeting or recessing it to a future date, would have some say in when that future date would be and whether or not he or she would go forward with suspending it. I've been pulled in two different directions, Mr. Chairman. I've read some things that make me think that the selectmen can set a date at any time. Like if they wanted to set one in September, they could. And I've read other things that suggest that, no, you have to set a date before June 30th. And if you can't have the meeting, then the moderator recesses the meeting for up to 30 days. So I'm still trying to parse that out. Still trying to get somebody to give us clear guidance on that. I'm defaulting to that idea, the last idea, that because of all the concerns that Gene raises, you really need to try to have a meeting. So you keep setting the date so that if you get to that date and you can have the meeting, you have the meeting. As long as you've got a date set, you've got something you're working toward. And then if it just absolutely can't happen, then there's a consensus around that between all involved, the moderator, the finance committee, and the board of selectmen and the administration on, well, when would the next best date be? And the moderator convenes it and says, we're going to recess this for 30 days and come back on a date certain. That makes it more of a proactive stance to getting the meeting done as soon as possible. The only problem with that is that it really makes it hard. I don't know how Gene feels about it. It makes it hard for me to operate because now what am I writing? Am I writing a month-to-month budget? Am I writing an annual budget? And I would rather know either way whether we're going to have a meeting or not for my own convenience. But like I say, I still think the best approach is to try to set a date. So when the last time I spoke to the moderator on Friday, I believe it was during my commute home, or Thursday night, we get down in the weeds on the technical aspects of pulling off a meeting in late June, so that at least we'd be prepared for that eventuality.
What were those discussions like? When you say technical, you mean logistical?
Yeah, well, by technical, I mean, so my concern is this. I want everybody to be able to hear and to see to the extent that they need to be able to see. And by that, I mean being able to count votes or be recognized by the moderator by rising or raising your hand or whatever. Because we've had some difficulties in the past, Mr. Chairman. It hasn't always been rosy when we needed to set up an overflow room. Those cables get really stretched out and the signal quality is very poor. And for all intents and purposes, if you're sitting in an overflow room and you can't hear what the moderator is saying or what the speaker is, you're not really at town meeting.
Matthew, I'll concede that if we get to June 22nd and we need the overflow room, that might be a logistical issue. But I have little expectation that we'll be getting to the need for an overflow room on June 22nd.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the other thing we could do. We could speculate about how many people are going to show up.
Well, rather than speculate on that, I guess my question is June 22nd evolving as the date when we're first going to take a crack at this?
No, because I think that's a Monday. And where the moderator and I left off was that it might be better to shoot for the 20th, Saturday, so that we can have the meeting during the day. So that if we did have a lot of issues or a lot of discussion, we wouldn't be forced to call the meeting for the sake of darkness or mosquitoes or whatever. So June 20th is kind of what we were looking at, with the 22nd as the fallback date.
Are we talking about an outdoor meeting at this point?
What's that?
Are we talking about an outdoor meeting?
Yeah, so I was just about to get to that point. The high school auditorium was measured out. So if we observe social distancing in the high school auditorium, you would maximum put 117 people in there. If the cafeteria were used as the overflow, the maximum capacity with social distancing would be 100. I don't think it's that unusual to have an annual town meeting with over 100 people.
Can I, maybe I can interrupt. Is the social distancing requirement only if people don't have personal protective equipment on?
No.
I thought the way I was seeing it is if you can't maintain the 6 feet distance, then you have to have a mask on.
No, both.
Well, no, it's that one. It's the one he just said. If you can't maintain 6 feet.
So in other words, you
Mask
could
on.
require everybody to wear a mask to go in there, and you could fit more people than just the 6 foot distance, right?
No.
Are you sure about that?
Well, let's put it this way, so that everybody understands. The governor's order limiting the size of an assembly does not apply to municipal town meeting.
Right.
So the sky's the limit. You can have any number of people at an assemblage. The thing is, and I go back to my earlier point about, I might be comfortable, Mr. Landry may be comfortable, Mr. Chairman, other people may be comfortable sitting 2 feet away from somebody with a mask on in a high school auditorium, but there are going to be people who don't want to do that at all. So I'm not sure how that works for folks.
Candidly, I find it inconceivable at the moment that we would even begin to discuss something that did not contemplate both 6 feet and masks. Because if the whole point of your discussion, Matthew, is trying to maximize participation to minimize disenfranchisement, I think you've got to have both levels of protection available to give the greatest number of people the greatest sense of security, even where we know even both of those levels of protection still won't give many people a satisfactory sense of protection to afford them a comfort level to come out. But I can't even imagine suggesting a meeting where people could get within a couple of feet of each other with masks on.
Yeah, and I'm not going to name names, but there are people who have been very active in the community in Douglas, who have served on the finance committee and other boards in town, who may or may not have health conditions where they just don't want to be around other people right now. It's just too scary.
I completely accede to that. I get that. I fully respect that. I think we should all be respecting that. Matthew, we had a town election today.
Yeah.
So the concept that the town would be concerned about participation was already, a standard was already established today. Now, that event is different in terms of spacing and everybody in the room at the same time, but a person that won't come out of their house on June 22nd didn't come out today, and the town was not concerned about that sufficiently to move the date of the election.
Well,
So,
no, that's not even close to being fair. The person doesn't want to come out of their house. They had up until noon yesterday to get a mail ballot or an absentee ballot and turn it in.
That's fair. That's fair. And you can't do that. That's fair. So you're contemplating June 20th, Saturday?
I'd like to put the marker in the sand so that, you know, out of respect for all the concerns of the finance director and having some date where we begin to start a clock. It's just good for the operation to know that you're laboring against something, because if you're prepared for June 20th, you'll be prepared for whatever date comes up, whether it's June 20th or some future date. The work will have been done. You may make some adjustments based on circumstances, but a lot of your judgments have been made, the conversations have occurred, and the forecast, you know, tightened up to the extent that it's possible. So yes, I mean, I know it sounds like we're pulling in two different directions, but it's actually all one direction, which is to try to get a budget that can be defended. And it's entirely possible, sitting here on May 12th, that we have absolutely no idea where we're going to be on June 12th. And June 12th, we may all be saying, well, the whole COVID thing kind of blew over, didn't it? In which case, we ought to have town meeting right away. You know what I'm saying? It's contingency planning, I guess is what I'm saying.
So is that a yes?
Yeah, it's a yes.
Okay. So Matthew, if we set June.
Fortunately, this is a selectman's decision along with the town moderator.
Yeah, but your opinion matters a great deal because you're part of town meeting. You're part of the apparatus.
Sure.
Matthew, if we set June 20 as a tentative date, when would you be able to have your version or this Board of Selectmen's version of the proposed budget? Or do you have a sense that Board of Selectmen will not want to propose that budget and finance should do it?
So in order to try to get to the targets, I had to start doing this work. I'm going to sound like a broken record. I could press the print button at any point and give you the my latest and greatest thinking on the budget, and it would balance because that's what I do every day. I try to get it to balance when I work. So, I mean, we were in a really compressed time frame. I was hoping to have something in front of both your committee and the Board of Selectmen before you meet on the 19th, so you at least have a so-called straw man that you can kick around.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think I'm 90% of the way there, so I don't know that I would need much more.
Okay. And that would give finance the ability after May 19, depending on where we are with a June 20 possible meeting, to decide if we needed to meet again to determine whether we wanted to propose any alternate numbers to what, looks like the initial soft proposal out of town administrator.
Well, it'll be anything but soft, but yes, it would give you the time to work on it.
Is there any consensus at the moment amongst towns as to how they might want to address? Has BVT given any indication that they would be prepared to reduce their request based on circumstances?
No, that's
Okay.
I think Douglas is going to be first in the charge.
Well,
You know, the two guys you don't want to be on the old battlefield, right? The guy with the flag and the guy with the drum.
well, so that's an answer to both. The DVT has not given any indication of being prepared to take less, and no other towns have given you any indication that they'd be looking to ask BVT to take a little less.
Yeah, that's the conversation we're just beginning to broach. My colleagues have a lot of, they've got a lot of apples in there. We're much more focused on this than I got to say, there's probably 2 or 3 other towns that really look carefully at the BVT budget, and most of the others don't. They don't have the student population going into the school. They don't have very much volatility in the numbers of students that get accepted and what their tuition bill is. So it's really hard to persuade them to do anything. But it's the column in the request, that additional assessment, where we might be able to get some traction.
Well, and I don't want to get in this COVID period on my annual BVT soapbox. I don't. I understand that. But at the same time, where everyone, all 13 towns, are now addressing what clearly, Matt, I heard you when you said, you're loath to engage in the analysis as to specifically people in town who may lose their jobs based on budget cuts, based on COVID. It still feels unfair to me to come in and tell every other part of our budget that they're going to see a 4% reduction, a draconian reduction, and then vote 10 seconds later to grant a 5.7% year-over-year increase for one section of our budget. I'm uncomfortable with that.
Well said, Howard.
I
Well
couldn't
said.
agree more.
That's not a sharing of the pain community event. Somebody, whether I have to carry that flag or not, somebody really needs, if that's where 13 towns are headed and jobs are going to be lost, someone does need to have that discussion. And if it has to be the chair of finance from Douglas, then it will be. If the finance votes in a subsequent meeting to recommend that be done. Okay. Any other thoughts at the moment, anyone?
No.
Does everybody feel comfortable where they stand heading into next Tuesday's meeting?
Matt, you'll give us something to look at, a preliminary budget, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Fantastic. And Jean and Matt, Jean, I don't know if you're comfortable with it or not, but you both can feel free to copy the entire committee on anything you send me with regard to those types of documents.
Okay, we usually go through the chair. That's fine. If that saves you-
I don't do COVID and remote too well. It does knock me off just an extra step. So I don't mind if you don't mind flipping things directly as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody needs to, so they cannot reply.
Yes.
Pardon?
Yeah, you can't reply. No discussion.
We understand, and we've had that discussion internally.
Now, Howard, after next May 9th meeting, can I ask what your sense is for any future meetings? Because I may want to put one interdepartmental transfer together, and that would be for the cemetery. The last thing I want is for our residents not to have their cemeteries mowed because they ran out of money. I think I have enough for one mowing, but between now and June 20, they'll probably do more than one. So I may put a couple together for your consideration. And since the board is meeting the same night, it would be very productive, I think, if we do some of the emergency, well, they're not really emergency, but more time sensitive ones.
So I would be open to a meeting on June 2nd, just finance, to again assess how we came out of the May 19th meeting, where we're all at, whether we're rolling toward a June 20th meeting and a real, having that meeting, whether we've got Matt's budget, and Gina, look for your input on that. So I like the idea, if folks don't mind. We've clearly in April didn't put in, and in the back half of March put in the time we normally put in. I think it's very reasonable to try to schedule, if folks would do it, can do it, a June 2 meeting. What are folks' thoughts on that?
Is there some reason you don't want to go with May 26th, 2 weeks from today?
Lynn, only because we would be having the May 19th meeting 1 week from today. And just 3 Tuesdays in a row can be burdensome on some folks. If there's a perception that more needs to be covered sooner, I'm okay with May 26th. Keep in mind, it is the Tuesday right after the long Memorial Day weekend.
Mhm.
I'm open to discussion. Jean, what's your input on whether you prefer us May 26th versus June 2?
I think, I don't know if it's 6 of one, half a dozen. I think June 2nd's fine. It's really going to depend on how much traction we have on May 19th.
Lynn, I'll be honest, the reason too that June 2 might make sense is things keep evolving so much.
Right.
Week to week, day to day.
That's fine, Howard. I was just,
Yeah. No, I get it. We're all waiting to see what the governor's order is for May 18th. Last night he announced a 4-phase rollout.
Mhm.
We're looking to see what phase 1 is, and we might know more by June 2 of what phase 2 is.
That's true.
So how about June 2 at 7? Jean, you know how this works by now.
I do. I'll be sending you an agenda for both May 19th and June 2nd right now.
And you're going to put yourself on the agenda anywhere you want.
Oh, I try to not do that, but I will have FY21 budget, as well as intra-departmental transfers, and yeah.
And Matt, you'll get us something between now and May 19th.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a way?
Anyone
that
like
we
to
can-
make a motion?
Motion to adjourn FinCom meeting?
No,
Yeah.
I don't want to adjourn yet.
Carol's got something to say.
Go, Carol.
Is there any way we can see what else was planned to be on the town meeting besides budget items?
Well, my recommendation to address Matt's concern about if people don't feel comfortable enough to go is to only have the financial articles on there. If we had to have something.
Yeah, I mean, we have a real strong view on this, to not do anything other than financial articles.
Okay.
There's work that goes to zoning and other the house cleaning items around the planning board, property takings, all that stuff. And that requires a certain amount of hoof work. And we're so busy with the budget and with our day-to-day operations responding to the emergency that we haven't. It's not that we can't get up in front of a room and explain it and ask them for a vote. It's just our expectation is it will be difficult enough to carry off a budget and financial articles in the social conditions that we're in the time frame that we're trying to do it in. And those items they might just drag the meeting on. They may not get the attention they actually deserve. So
Okay.
that's where we're at.
Okay. Sounds good.
There's some energy, Carol, behind doing some economic development stuff. And what I've told people is that I need more meat on the bones, first of all, for some of those proposals. But second of all, we can call a special anytime we need one to do those items, provided that, all the conditions we've talked about for ATM are met.
Okay.
But we just got some sort of emergency response going on here. So that's the long answer to your short question.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any motions?
Motion to
Dean, you
adjourn.
want to propose a motion?
I'll second that.
No, nobody proposed one that could.
I did. I proposed adjournment.
Oh, Sandy, hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Excellent.
Sandy, we
Nice
can't see
level.
you. You look like a shadow.
I know I am. I'm sorry.
You don't. You have
When
a
Sandy speaks up, it's one of the best speaking parts of the evening.
Okay.
A second to Sandy's motion?
I'll
I'll
second.
it. Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, one of us, we're all seconding.
Those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your participation this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.